And greetings. Happy Monday. Belated happy Father's Day to all the dads out there and to the two dads I work with in here. I am Steve Deace. These two dads are Todd Erzin and Aaron McIntyre. We are brought to you by our good friends at First Cup Coffee Company here on BlazeTV radio and podcast. They have a flavor for every freedom-loving American. If you want to try it today, get 10% off when you go to when you go to firstcup.com/Deace. Use the keyword Deace. Firstcup.com, use the keyword Deace. Firstcup.com, use the keyword Deace. It'll be shipped to you within days of being roasted. And if you subscribe, you'll get an additional 10% off for the life of your subscription at firstcup.com. Use the promo code Deace. Also, don't forget about the latest Blaze Original Special from Sarah Gonzalez. If you have not seen this, you need to. However, if you are already struggling with high blood pressure, I would urge you to not watch this. Maybe have someone maybe fill you in, summarize it for you in a very low and relaxed, dulcet tone voice. Because when you find out there's things like over 20,000 dead people on the voter rolls in Michigan and things of that nature, you might get a little bit worked up. All right. Go to blazeoriginals.com/Deace. Voter fraud exposed. How elections can be stolen. It's an outstanding. We're really on a run of outstanding things here. And hey, I'm not just going to say everything our network does is outstanding. If I don't say it's outstanding, it typically means I didn't think it was outstanding. Okay. So this is outstanding. I mean, I'll be a team player. You know, we're all wearing this. It's about the name on the front of the jersey, not the name on the back, right? You know, so, I'm not going to just like openly diss our stuff, okay? But I'm not going to say everything is outstanding either. This is outstanding. BlazeOriginals.com/Deace. Get $30 off if you use the promo code VoterFraud. $30 off if you use the code VoterFraud at Blaze Originals. Originals, plural. BlazeOriginals.com/Deace. Okay. Coming up on the show today, we have and continue to address the state of the American pulpit on this show, because almost everything that we talk about on this program, and really on every other form of righty or alternative media that you consume, it comes down to three things over and over again. By and large, we've turned our backs on God, the sorry state of the men, and the pathetic, anemic, emasculated state of the church. Basically, everything does. Everything does. All right, so we're going to talk about an effort to do something about the state of the church and reach the pastors. In fact, I'm going to be speaking at the next version of one of these later this summer in Dallas. So we're going to talk about that at the bottom of this hour. Next hour, I know a lot of you have heard about this Ninth Circuit Court ruling on the COVID vaccine. That's not a vaccine, but is actually a toxic genetic serum. Brian Festa, our good friend from We the Patriots USA, is going to join us. We may keep Brian the entire hour, next hour, because I want to make sure we do as deep a dive on this as we can, that we get people as informed on this as we can, and what's true, what's not, what's exaggeration, what's real. We're going to try to get into all of that and what this may mean in the broader healthcare freedom debate coming up next hour. That is a conversation you do not want to miss. That'll be an hour from now. But until we get there, let's begin as we always do with Aaron's rundown of what happened while we were away.
What happened while we were away, brought to you by Bump Stocks Are Back. Supreme Court on Friday struck down a Trump-era ban on bump stocks. That's the rapid-fire gun accessories used in the deadliest mass shooting in modern U.S. history. The highest court's Republican-appointed majority found that the Trump administration overstepped when it changed course from predecessors and banned bump stocks, which allow a higher rate of fire for semi-automatic rifles. U.S. House passed its version of the National Defense Authorization Act on Friday, which includes a provision which will automatically register all males between the ages of 18 and 26 for the Selective Service. That version of the NDAA is expected to go nowhere in the Senate, where Chuck Schumer blasted the House version on Friday, citing its lack of funding for meatball surgery for dudes who feel pretty, among other things. Speaking of Schumer, his media team had to delete this post yesterday where he's pictured in front of a gas grill with an assortment of hot dogs and hamburgers. The hot dogs are cooked, but the hamburgers are still raw, with one patty having a slice of cheese already on top of it. Schumer joins a long line of Democrat photo ops in front of grills, looking absolutely clueless. Late last week at the G7 summit in Italy, Pope Francis visited the world leaders gathered there and received this weird forehead-to-forehead hug from Joe Biden. A hot mic picked up part of the pontiff and Biden's awkward exchange.
Listen, Fat, I'm the Pope now.
Il ragazzo
Do you want to touch my hairy legs?
sei omosessuale. No.
Jill Biden, your thoughts?
This election is most certainly not about age. Joe and that other guy are essentially the same age. Let's not be fooled. Joe isn't one of the most effective presidents of our lives in spite of his age, but because of it.
In completely unrelated news, back in the U.S. at a multi-million-dollar L.A. fundraiser yesterday, Joe Biden froze on stage again and had to be helped off the stage by former President Barack Obama.
Joe isn't one of the most effective presidents of our lives in spite of his age, but because of it.
In further completely unrelated news, you can't make this stuff up. The White House on Friday issued a proclamation commemorating World Elder Abuse Day. Donald Trump spoke at the Turning Point USA event over the weekend in Detroit, Michigan, and laid out his Day One agenda.
On Day One, I will sign a new executive order to cut federal funding for any school pushing critical race theory, transgender insanity, and other inappropriate racial, sexual, or political content onto the lives of our children. And I will not give one penny to any school that has a vaccine mandate or a mask mandate. And I will keep men out of women's sports.
And finally, this from the Babylon Bee. Biden disappointed after huge scoop of vanilla ice cream turns out to be Pope Francis. And that's what happened while we were away.
Aaron's montage, fittingly, brought to you by our friends over at MD Hearing Aid. If you are having a hard time hearing as you're getting older, or like me, you had a mysterious viral attack that wiped out one of your ears, and you still don't have all your hearing back in that ear, whatever the case may be, I'm proud to tell you about our friends over at MD Hearing Aids. If you're still paying thousands of dollars for hearing aids that don't even work right, stop. MD Hearing is an FDA-registered rechargeable hearing aid, and it costs a fraction of what typical hearing aids cost. What do I mean by a fraction? How about their latest Neo model cost over 90% less? 90% less than clinical hearing aids, and the Neo actually fits inside your ear to the point no one will even know that it's there. How do they do this? Well, MD Hearing was founded by an ENT surgeon who saw how many of his patients needed hearing aids but could not afford them, so he made it his mission to develop a quality hearing aid that anyone can afford, and that's called MD Hearing. So, it's so good, and you can't beat it with this great deal. Go to shopmdhearing.com, use the promo code STEVE to get their new $297 when you buy a pair offer. Plus, they're adding a free extra charging case that's a $100 value just for our listeners and viewers here on the Steve Deace Show. That's shopmdhearing.com for this great deal. Use the promo code STEVE at shopmdhearing.com. Use the promo code STEVE. All right, let us discuss what is in Aaron's montage. That view where Milei, that's the Argentinian president, correct? Yeah, the libertarian guy. That look on his face where he's kind of doing the Homer Simpson gif where he's backing away as whatever that was going on between Biden and the Pope there. Okay, other than maybe the all-time greatest metaphor alert that I've witnessed in my lifetime. It's like Death of the West update caption in one photo. Yeah. All right. Those two guys forehead to forehead. Okay. But Milei is backing away, and he's like, and this is why I just converted to Judaism. I mean, that is, I mean, yikes. That photo op, it is the mother of all metaphors right there.
because everybody understands, Catholic or not, what could be.
What each of these men represent.
Yes.
One represents the largest expression of Christianity on planet Earth, and the other guy represents the most powerful nation on planet Earth.
This picture, Steve, when you and I were coming of age in the 80s, this picture was Pope John Paul II and Ronald Reagan.
Correct.
Now, Ronald Reagan, not Catholic, but those two people, along with Margaret Thatcher, literally, made sure that the world did not go to hell.
Yep.
The power of their influence, their set of principles, their willingness to work together. That's what's behind. That's why this picture is so heartbreaking to me as a Catholic, because there is so much potential within such a relationship that is just a laugh track now, at best.
Yes. Speaking of laugh tracks, why do Democrats keep trotting out these like cringy grill master photos? And Chuck Schumer putting the cheese on the raw meat. I mean,
it's almost like their staff is trolling them.
I know. I mean, here's the thing, too. They don't even have to do this.
No.
They don't have to pander to some common man. They can just lie to these people. They control all the media. They've got more money to just douse the airwaves with whatever narrative they want. You see what I'm saying? This is not... It's not even a requirement to even do. This isn't, the 40s where you have to barnstorm on trains, okay? I mean, this isn't... They can just lie. They do this frequently. Just keep lying. You're better at that. I mean, it's Elizabeth Warren pouring herself a beer. What was that? A Facebook Live or a TikTok or something several years ago?
My goodness.
Okay.
Here's my husband, who I am married to, walking into our kitchen that we own together.
Very stilted
Hello,
and awkwardly.
husband. Would you like a beer?
Yes, indeed. Stepford wife. Yes. They don't even you don't have to do this. Just keep lying. All right. I mean, I've given up trying to consult Republicans. Maybe I just need to consult Democrats. Keep lying. Just keep lying. Just keep spending money and lying. You don't need to open yourselves up to this level of rim shot, troll, the jokes on you. Just keep lying. That's working well for you. Obama assisting Biden off the stage. And you can tell this one stung. The amount of effort that their people are doing online to make it look like this has been edited and it's not the raw video and everything else indicates just they are... Here's the thing. I'm going to go back to, in case you guys missed it on the Deace group last Friday, I did something I don't think I've ever done before. I reversed a prediction I just made the week prior. I do think...
You are hanging on by a very thin thread. I dig that about you.
And basically, I'm gonna do what the old professional handicapping touts used to do with their 1-900 numbers. You called 1 hour and you got one side of the line. You called another hour, you got another side of the line, and they told you they got 75%, right? Okay. So I'm just gonna predict every possible outcome. One of them will happen, and then I'm gonna tell you guys, see, I got that right. Anyway, I do think the debate will happen now on the 27th. I think it will be Biden's only debate.
It's win-win for them.
Agreed. They can't lose. If the White House apothecary has one more dosage in him yet,
if he wins this debate, man,
that Biden's drug tolerance, you see this. You have old people that are on pain meds. You have elderly parents that are on drugs like morphine and things of that nature to help them get through the day. You take enough of that stuff over time, and your body builds up such a tolerance to it that it just... What they have to do now to penetrate that is basically just give you a crack or a speedball. Okay, hey kid, hey Gramps, there's some crystal meth for you in the back. I mean, literally. I mean, that's where they're good. We'll see if there's one more injection or concoction from the White House apothecary that can keep him upright, where he does one of those performances where he just doesn't blink for an hour. Okay, and if he can, they'll walk away June 27th and say, we got it done. We're not, and then, because after that, Trump will be sentenced, right? Okay. We're not going to debate a prisoner. He's incarcerated, or he's under house arrest, or he's a convicted felon. We're not going to do that. We got it done. And if you look ahead to the third and fourth quarters, man, they are just buying every ad avail right now in the country. And I mean, if you want Trump to win, as I do, we're way behind in the ad war. Way behind. Like counting votes in Wayne County, Michigan behind. Okay? That level of behind. Like, it's great the amount of money Trump's raising now, but the avails that it's almost like he won't have the places to spend the money. You see what I'm saying? There's only so many commercial breaks, and when they're all bought, they're gone. You know, they're not going to like cut into more of the NFL to run a commercial, especially for Trump. Okay? So there's only so many commercials. And they're buying up a hella bunch of them right now. So you see if the injection, the concoction, the witch's brew, whatever it is you're putting into him for these occasions, you see if it holds up one more time. You put him out. If it does, you shut it down. You just make the whole campaign an air war. Okay, and take your chances that between your advantage there and your turnout operation, okay, that those things will be enough, right? Mm-hmm. And then if he just goes, if indeed, like you just saw in that clip where Barack Obama's basically got to stop him from just staring off into space and walk him off the stage. If the moderator's like, Mr. President, you see what I'm saying? If that kind of stuff starts happening, they've got almost 2 full months. The Democratic convention, I think, is the 15th, the 19th, something like that. So they almost 2 full months. You have an open convention, and you can get around Kamala that way too, because she wouldn't win it. And as long as it's not a straight white male, you'll come out with some intersectionality upgrade over the straight white male with dementia, right? Okay, and you promise Kamala a Senate seat, and I think Hunter is looking at a prison sentence. Hunter's looking at it. His prison sentencing and his tax trial are all slated to happen like right before the election this fall. Like, I think it's the trial for taxes in September, and the sentencing right now looks like late September, early October. So, I mean, that would be right before the election. And so you tell, here's your gold watch, Joe. You get to pardon Hunter Biden and move on, and he never has to spend a day in jail, okay? And they give you the American people a fresh face. If those two things don't happen, or one of those two things do not happen, then it's honestly inexplicable. Like, I couldn't imagine having the institutional advantages that they have in this process and ending this outcome with just keep trotting him out there over and over again to keep exposing this. Do you see what I'm saying? I wouldn't even know what to make of that. Maybe I might have to post my own now painting of Jesus with his hand on Trump's shoulder. Because if they keep doing that, maybe he really is God's anointed at that point. Because I just can't imagine having all the advantages that they have with their turnout operation. Okay, and also the media, the open convention that goes last after Republicans, why they would just keep throwing him out there if they don't have to.
I totally agree, and you know what I think about their ability to use Biden. He squeeze every ounce of life out of him and operate behind the scenes. But the one thing I can think of, and it's in Aaron's montage, that would be the answer, is there's a game of chicken going on between the powers that be behind the scenes and Jill Biden, because you see up there how she's willing to go to the mattresses. She's not trying to defend him, pull back, let's go to retire. She wants him out there. Is there part of, and if she's like, listen, if you push us out, I am going to spill all the beans on everything. I have no evidence of this, but that prompted what Aaron put in the montage in my mind.
I have no idea what level of power within the Democratic infrastructure Jill Biden has.
She would just have to know how many bodies are buried and where they are. If she has that information.
Who gives her the interview? Yeah, who gives her the platform? They just memory hole things, guys. You see what I'm saying? Yeah. Which Jill Biden just going to go out there and create a burner account and just start tweeting? Give me the media outlet that in the middle of an election allows Jill Biden, Democrat. Let's play out my scenario. Joe Biden face plants here 2 weeks from Thursday, all right? And they have to, or a week from Thursday, and they have to move on, okay? And they do. And they come out of this with Pete Buttigieg, gay man. Hakeem Jeffries, black man. See what I'm saying?
Of course.
They come out of this with some minority, some woke caricature. Who's going to give the white woman, give me the media outlet that's going to give, on their side, that's going to give the white woman, the corporate media outlet's going to say, and we're here on the Today Show to sit down with Jill Biden, where she can air the Democratic Party's dirty laundry and help the Republicans before the election. I can't see that happening.
I can see anything and everything happen.
And that means you're probably right. Okay. That being, maybe that would be one caveat. Okay, that would be one. What you just said.
What explains her not wanting to take him off and say, we did our time, let's go retire, this is going to be embarrassing, yet she's doing that.
One thing I've learned being around a lot of politicians is most of the time, and most of the ones that I'm around, we would probably consider to be good ones. It's very few that I really have felt like I have known that I thought there's a real person there still. Even, and so I don't, and not like a construct. The amount of narcissism and egotism that exists in their world on a daily basis, everything is about them. Okay. It's just something I think the average person doesn't have the benefit or the luxury or the curse, I would say, of living a life like that, of thinking that you can literally fold space-time, you know what I'm saying, and just push a hole through and violate laws of physics and thermodynamics and economics. This is truly a Luciferian realm of projection and magical thinking. And the amount of people I've known, and that's just, again, most of the politicians I'm around are the ones we think are the good ones. The amount of them that I have known that I thought there was still a real person there. Like, if they weren't doing this, would you want to spend any time with them at all? Would you have anything in common with them at all? It's a small list, a really small list. So if that's what the ones we think are good, imagine what happens to the people who just come into the process totally soulless. You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. The level of self-delusion, you see it in the WNBA. I mean, most politicians are basically Angel Reese. No self-awareness, they don't have to, because everything's, they live in a reality, been given a reality, and then concocted one on their own that it's just only about them at all times. Because you're right, in our world, what she's doing makes no sense. We're not in her world. That's a different world. All right. Trump talking about his first day in office. That would be an incredible first day in office. Anybody disagree with that? If that were to transpire, that would be an incredible first day in office. Those things.
Yep.
I don't disagree, but all I can remember is when he tweeted about what he was going to do with like trans in the military, and then absolutely nothing happened.
No, well, this gets crowd sizes.
This gets into the next point. Essentially, what he's admitting, because I've heard people say, well, we need to do like what they've done in Florida and a few other places where you're putting this at the statute level. Could not do it. There is no majority that is even remotely achievable. The Republicans could win this November in Congress, where the votes are there to do those things at a statute level. I mean, we did a ranking of best U.S. senators earlier this year. You guys remember? Do you guys remember where John Fetterman ranked?
How could I not?
Top 10.
Yeah, he was 12th.
Oh, 12th.
He might be top 10 now because he continues to increasingly, now he's even saying I'm not a progressive, okay? But we did this like in February, if I want to recall, guys, and we had him 12th, the 12th best U.S. senator. There's none of the 9 realms where any Republican majority that is remotely realistically achievable will sign off on any of those things. So you're looking, what Trump is also telling you is this is largely is you're looking at, past history. I like to always say, barring the Holy Spirit, past history is usually indicative of future performance. All right. Not always, sometimes in the natural, people have changes of hearts and rise to the occasion. You think of Winston Churchill, for example, in the darkest hour, right? Okay. But one of the reasons why that's one of the rare examples is because that's one of the rare examples. Yes. Most of the time, since Genesis chapter 3, so that's a long time ago, most of the time, barring the Holy Spirit, past history is indicative of future performance.
And Trump's 80.
Yeah,
or whatever.
Well, and the Republican Party's is what it is.
Yeah.
So what you're talking about is, what did we see during his presidency? If he could unilaterally do it, he did. almost every time. There were a couple things we tried to get him to unilaterally do that he didn't, like defy the courts, okay? Well, even then, he needed his Attorney General, Bill Barr, to sign off, and he would not, okay? So everything good he did, with one exception, the tax cut, everything else good he did was unilaterally imposed. And that was with having a majority of the Republicans to the first half of his presidency. Nothing was going to happen. They weren't going to do any of those things. That's not who the Republican Party is. And unfortunately, many of his endorsements this primary season have been total rhinos, and will just cement that. So you're largely seeing a repeat of this. There's no hope in the Republican Party would do the things he talks about. I think there's some hope that he would, because he did some variations of these themes, just these were maybe different issues in 2017, 2018, but, he did variations of these themes himself when he could. So I think that's likely what you're looking at. The same thing as before. If we could get Trump to do it, and it could be unilateral, the trainees in the military thing requires implementation from the Joint Chiefs. Right? See what I'm saying? Okay. They weren't going to do that. So he couldn't do it. If he could unilaterally do it and make it so, most of the time it happened. If it required any movement from any other government entity, and either of the other two and either the military, the Joint Chiefs, or the legislature, the legislative branch, it was a nada. So I could see him doing many of those things on his first day. Now they'll end up in court right away. The other side will run to federal judges who will remember when none of us knew what a universal injunction was until like February of 2017. And then we've heard about these like every week, all right, where like federal courts just granted themselves the power in the districts, ironically, in the districts Democrats control, just to put universal injunctions on every other federal court district. Remember these? Okay. Mm-hmm. So you're looking at a replay of what happened before, because barring the Holy Spirit, past history is usually indicative of future performance. So I would actually expect he'll try to do almost everything that he said there at an executive order level, and some will stand in the courts and then some won't. They won't defy the courts, but would that be demonstrably better than what we have right now? I would argue yes. Some of you in our audience are like, I want to stop this train. I want to get off. That's your call. I'm not going to exhaust any amount of political capital from this time forward on this election. I've made my opinion felt, known. I'm just looking at this analytically more so than morally. Analytically, I think he will try to do most of those things, if not all of them. Some will stand, some won't. He'll get absolutely no assistance from the Republican Party whatsoever, and some of that will be his own fault because of the kinds of people that he is supporting and endorsing within the Republican primaries as we speak. Thoughts?
Well, that very last point, the kinds of people. At some point, the vice presidential selection, even hint at cabinet members, the kind of people who will, are we going to get any closer to all the best people? So the people that can and will pursue things, I don't have any confidence in that either, but it's going to take that, because he's not going to have the energy that he did last time. I'm not going to hold my breath on any of this.
Old dogs, new tricks, all that. Sometimes, though, old dogs, what happens, Steve? You've got an old dog in your house. Well, they start to go crazy a little bit. I'm kind of cheering for that.
Yeah, I've said from the beginning, I'm not offended by Trump running for vengeance. I think that's actually, I find that...
I don't even know, I need to clarify, I don't even know yet if I'm going to vote for him. That's just what I'm going for.
I mean, that would have actually been the strongest argument the entire primary. If I really thought he was just going to go in there spiteful and vengeful,
well, that was your lament,
then I would have been more for it.
Going way back to 2016, the concern that he was going to be too tyrannical, and then he ended up just being
By 2018, I was like, we could use a little bit more of that authoritarian everybody was afraid of. Yeah. And I similarly, I'm because I understand people are either in the spirit or they're not. And if they're not in the spirit, then I'm looking for what motivates them to do righteous things in their flesh, right? And if vengeance and spite motivates him, I'm all for it then. You know, there used to be a time when our financial institutions had respect for our values instead of trying to destroy them. But like a lot of other things in America these days, that time is now gone. Thankfully, you've got another option. It's called America's Christian Credit Union. It's the #1 banking institution on Public Square. It's provided a full suite of financial services to God-fearing Americans just like you for more than 65 years. So this just isn't some recent startup. They've been around for a generation and more. Families, ministries, businesses across the country have ditched the big banks and chosen ACCU as their trusted financial partner instead. And when you switch to America's Christian Credit Union, you'll get great rates, cutting-edge mobile banking, and the convenience of more than 35,000 branches and ATMs nationwide. So if you don't have to keep doing business with people that hate you, why not just stop? And you can do that today when you go to America's Christian Credit Union. Find them online at America's Christian CU for credit union, americaschristiancu.com/switch. That's americaschristiancu.com/switch. And America's Christian Credit Union is a federally insured entity by the National Credit Union Association. So it is very, very clear that so goes the pulpit, or as goes the pulpit, so goes the culture. We read that statement, was that about a week ago? An article that Charles Finney wrote in the New York Independent. Like what was that? Like in 1870 something? I want to say that was. And everything that he wrote in that article is prophetic to the day and age that we are in now. Well, we have featured this outfit before, and they're doing another one of these to try to reach this generation of pastors before we're the last generation of Americans. And that's where we bring in our good friend Paul Blair. He's with Liberty Pastors. You can go to their website, libertypastors.com. That's libertypastors.com. But I should warn you, they are running low on good recommendations for speakers. They made it so far down the list that actually I'm invited to come and speak at the next one in Dallas later this summer. We'll tell you about that in a minute. But Paul, good to see you, brother. How are you?
I'm doing great, Steve. Thanks so much for having me on. By the way, congratulations. I understand you've joined the Grandfather Club.
I have. Yep.
Nothing like it.
Yep. Autumn is pretty close to perfection. Yes. My kids have asked me, so do I love Autumn more than them? I said no. Absolutely not. But she is certainly going to get, and I said, the rest of all your children will certainly get more benefit of the doubt than any of you guys did. I will say that. That'll be true.
That's right.
Yes. All right. So let's get to, speaking of the next generation, it'd be great to make sure we have one of those. So let's start with, again, kind of what's the origin, the genesis of Liberty Pastors? How long have you guys been doing this? Why are you doing it?
Well, it started about 5 years ago, but after we got kickstarted, I was diagnosed with throat cancer. So I had an unexpected stay at MD Anderson, which kind of delayed us from really getting going until the 2019 preparation for the election year, 2019-2020. And then, of course, in the middle of 2020, we had COVID, which is really what launched us, quite frankly, as we were speaking boldly about what pandemic and all the nonsense with it, the proper way to treat it. We had America's Frontline Doctors in. We did live streams with them. Of course, you led the charge in that as well. There were very few of us that saw this early on, and we're trying to provide truth to the people. So that's really what kind of launched this. And of course, our focus as pastors, as you referenced Charles Finney, for a country to be free, the people have to be educated and they have to be moral. And you look back at our history, those are two foundations upon which we were built. And then you look back in human history and you see when great acts of tyranny were carried out. For example, during the Dark Ages, the government, those in power, tried to suppress education among the peasants. They wanted to keep them as nothing but slave labor, and then keep that animal instinct rather than the biblical love your neighbor as yourself. It's the Marxist dog eat dog, only the strong survive. So we have seen our own culture crumble. And what's a shame, in fact, I've been hammering this in the pulpit on Sunday mornings. I think the American church is a fraud. I think it's dead. I think it's like the old Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer cartoon after the abominable snowman was de-toothed. All he was just a big toothless nothing. Mm-hmm. That's really what the American church is. The church that in Ephesus so shook the community that even the artisans that crafted the silver shrines around worship of the temple of Diana at the temple there in their headquarters were shaken by the impact that it had on their business because this small church. You look at Thessalonica, and the unbelievers came out against these formerly pagan, idol-worshiping, now Christians, and they had such an impact that they were accused of trying to turn the world upside down. Well, there's no threat of that happening now with the church. We just compromise and go along with the work. So we desperately need a genuine Great Awakening, and that's not just pastor speak. If we're going to save this political system, if we're going to save this republic, it will follow a great revival, just like the birth of our country in 1776 followed that first Great Awakening. So we're trying to, first of all, educate our pastors. We're trying to get them to think biblically about every area of life. Jesus isn't just the Lord on Sunday mornings. He's the Lord of everything that we do. We're trying to embolden them as they realize that they're not alone. There's a whole lot of us out there. We're trying to coordinate and then activate. And we've got a great system here. We've actually developed partnerships with some other ministries. Of course, we've got Liberty Pastors. We start with training the pastors, because if you can get the pastor awake, then you've got his whole church following his lead. But if you've got a cowardly pastor that doesn't want his church to engage the culture, he can kill practically anything that's going on in his church. So we are tasked with reaching the pastor and educating them. Then we, of course, have Rick Green with biblical citizenship training. They go in and help train the people. Then we follow that up with a Salt Light Ministry, Dran Reese out of San Diego. We got permanent biblical citizenship going on in the church. And then what I call the special forces. A good friend of mine, an entrepreneur, brilliant, successful businessman, Steve Maxwell out of Central Florida. And Steve started a group called Citizens Defending Freedom. They are like Salt and Light, the special forces of Salt and Light. They're Salt and Light with teeth. And we engage in lawfare and everything. We had a group of 7 churches that were Liberty Pastor churches down in Corpus Christi that got together, went after a Soros DA in Corpus Christi, forced his resignation. And in the process, a revival began to break out among the cartels there in that Corpus Christi area, because this bandito district attorney was a part of the cartel, and one of the lieutenants got radically born again, and now there's a revival breaking out among these cartels. We've got a pastor that graduated our camp in Central Florida named Jack Hilligoss. Jack's become a dear friend. Jack ran for mayor, won. The very first thing he did as mayor was declare June Strong Fathers and Families Month and not Gay Pride Month. He caught hell for it, but he stood his ground and, of course, brought out other people of courage. His church has gone from 400 to 2,000. They started a school now, which is running 300, and they're having to expand. And in year 2, there were 7 cities in this county that refused to declare Gay Pride Month this last June. So that's what an awakening looks like. It's not just getting on your knees, say, Lord, forgive us. It's following it with a genuine change of heart and change of behavior. So that's why these pastors' camps are so important. We've trained about 2,000 of them so far. And this one coming up in Frisco is different than anything else. This is like graduate level training, and that's why it's so important that you're there. We've got 300 pastors coming to this one. It's $199. If they bring their wives, it's an additional $49. Covers their stay there at the Embassy Suite plus 5 meals. On opening night, of course, you wrote Fauci and Bargain. You saw how the church stood silent and watched hundreds of thousands of its members get fired from their jobs or forced to take an experimental shot. We don't even know what all the ramifications of that are yet. We're still learning. We got Pastor Jim Garlow from Skyline Church in San Diego. Jim led the fight in California several years ago to stop the Prop 8 battle. Jim led a fight where even California voted not to recognize gay marriage. And then we've got Frank Pavone. Of course, Frank is a Catholic priest, the founder of Priests for Life. And Frank has been on the front lines of the war trying to end the murder of innocent children in our country. So with me, basically giving the background, again, kind of leading some of the discussion. Of course, you're going to talk about what the church has to do to respond against the globalist agenda. And of course, COVID was an example of that. And then Frank and his battle to save life, and Jim and his courage and to push back against the homosexual agenda. And then we'll have a roundtable discussion up there, and we're going to set the tempo. We're going to set the pace for the rest of what happens. And by the way, this is going to be broadcast on Epoch Times. The whole thing is going to be live streamed. So why we only have room for 300 pastors and their wives there live, we can promote this, and hopefully we have tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of people that get educated and find out what's really going on. You know, this is not Republican versus Democrat. You know, this is the globalist deep state. It's that blob, that uniparty of the John McCain Republicans versus virtually every Marxist Democrat that are out there working to cut the knees out from under American sovereignty, because we're really the last political line of resistance towards, the Davos crowd and global government. So this is such an important event. I'm so thrilled that you and Amy were able to make time in your schedule to be there with us, because you're a big part of it.
Well, we're looking forward to it. Really excited about it. Is there still room? If there's pastors in the audience right now and they want to come, is there still room for more?
We've already got about 100 seats sold. Of course, we're about 6 or 8 weeks out, so we still got a lot of time. And typically, like so many, people will sit around and go, "Yeah, I'm going to think about it," and then about 3 weeks out, they want to sign up. I don't want to give them that luxury. With your help and with Garlow's help and others, we want to promote this thing. We want to max it out. Again, we've already got about a third of the seats sold, and the biggest thing is just information, letting people know that this is going on out there. So with your show and your promotion here, that'll be a great assistance. But again, $199, and it's only $49 for the wife, and that covers their stay at the Embassy Suites, and of course their meals and all of the education. Going to find out what's going on. And Steve, to be honest with you, we've seen 11 million illegals come across our border over these last few years. If only 1% of those were actually terrorists,
I know.
We are vulnerable towards an October 7th type of event.
I know.
So we're gonna have some uncomfortable conversations there, but we're gonna open the eyes of our pastors and hopefully prepare our pastors to protect their flock.
LibertyPastors.com is where you can go. Again, LibertyPastors.com is the website. Once again, LibertyPastors.com. That's where you can go get more information and register to be a part of the event. Before we go, I want to drive home something you said that I think is a very important distinction. Okay? There's this whole debate, and I've largely ignored it because I think it's a whole fallacy that's not worth it. Are you a Christian nationalist or not, and all this? That's just that's nothing anymore. Were you religious right in the 80s? Were you a values voters in the 90s? I mean, it's just the latest term du jour. It's largely a distraction. But there's this idea in the church that has grown out of the church growth movement of the last generation, that the way to grow your church is to steer clear of these divisive cultural issues. Now, let's assume that that's just not a demonic deception. It is. But let's assume people are just doing this earnestly. They're not. But let's assume. Let's give mercy triumphs over judgment. Let's give the benefit of the doubt. What you're seeing now is that era of the church has lost its salt. And when the salt has lost its savor, it's of no use to anybody except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. You are seeing those were the churches that all closed during COVID, did not want to reopen, and they sent their communities a message. We're not a special place. We're not prophetic here. We don't have any power here. And largely people have not returned to those places post-COVID because they're like, I can get by just fine without you. You're right, okay? Look, the distinction that Paul just drew is very important. by demonstrating the power of the gospel, by testifying to its power in the civic and public realm, like the apostles did when the battle was there. That wasn't the only battle. Sometimes the battle was with widows who needed healing and children who needed saving. Okay, but that was a battlefield. When the battlefield was there, all right, you see when the power of the gospel is displayed in every battlefield, including the civic one, you see the belief in the gospel grows when the evidence of its power and its transforming power is demonstrated, when it's not muted, when it's not emasculated, when it's not just sit over here to get you to say some prayer you really didn't mean because you felt guilty about things you really don't feel guilty about once. But true power is demonstrated. And darkness is truly prevailed upon. You see the people God has called respond to that calling. And that's what I'm interested in. And I wanted to make sure, I've only got about a minute here, Paul, but I wanted to make sure in the final minute that I drove home the distinction that you drew there, the order of those events, brother. So thank you very much. And we're looking forward to being down there later this summer. All right.
God bless you, Steve. And we'll be in touch and look forward to seeing you in Texas.
You got it, brother. God bless. You guys have a quick thought on that before we sign out of here for the first hour?
Well, it seems like one of the tricks to getting pastors to show up there is to make them aware of the things that they should be aware of to begin with. I think that's like knowing the signs of the times. I'd be fascinated to see what the conversations are like there. When he says making you aware of what's going on the border, making you aware of, the question remains, why is that something, how did it come to this point where they have to be made aware of this thing? I mean, if you can take care of that, that seems to be, the dominoes would seem to fall after that. But giving them eyes to see, for a pastor, that's a remarkable thing to have to accomplish.
Yeah, God bless Paul and the effort to at least strengthen and embolden pastors. That is the one thing, one of the things. It's at least in the top 2 or 3 things, but I think it's the first domino that has to fall in this country in order to spark any sort of revival is a sense of fearlessness and boldness from the pulpit. And for too long, these pastors' conferences, there are a lot of pastors' conferences out there, but they're not designed for that. They're designed as kind of a different costume on big business consultant conferences, how to grow your business in 5 easy steps. That's what pastors' conferences typically are. That's what church growth conferences or church conferences typically are. Not ones designed to actually embolden pastors to preach the gospel and the full counsel of God's word and to testify to the power of the Holy Spirit. That's what it sounds like this is going to do. And more power to them. God bless them. And I hope this is a successful and fruitful event.
Amen. All right, when we come back, we're going to do a deep dive on this latest Ninth Circuit Court ruling on the toxic COVID jab and what it may mean moving forward for the broader battle over medical freedom. We'll get into that with Brian Festa of We the Patriots USA. You don't want to miss it. Stay tuned. Back here with Hour 2, live and on demand on BlazeTV, radio, and podcast. Steve Deace here with Aaron McIntyre and Todd Erzin. You can let us know what you think about what we think via the stevedeace.com inbox. Take advantage of that by emailing the show, steve@stevedeace.com. That's DEACE. You can also like us on Facebook, MeWe, and Gab. Follow me at Steve Deace Show on Twitter, Getter, Instagram, and TikTok. And if you listen to the podcast version of the program, thank you. You're a big part of our show's continued and mystifying success, if I do say so myself. Please, if you wouldn't mind, show how much you love the show by leaving us a 5-star review if you like us. You can also hit subscribe, or in the case of iTunes, follow. That way, every time we do a new episode, it will show up in your feed every single time, and you won't miss a single one, because why would you want to go and do a thing like that? Also want to thank our friends over at Preborn. They understand what it means to protect innocent life, and that's why they're the nation's leader in protecting the life of the unborn by introducing babies to their mothers through ultrasounds. A baby's chance at life doubles once a mom is confronted with the reality that that is another human being that she is carrying. And that's why Preborn and their network of clinics offer free ultrasounds to women with unplanned pregnancies in the highest baby murder areas in the country. That's right. They go where the battle is hottest. That's why we're supporting them here on this show and on The Blaze. And it's through their good work that Preborn rescues up to 200 babies per day. And they don't stop there. They also are a ministry of compassion. They love these women and their babies. They offer assistance for up to 2 years, right? Because they understand here that they are a package deal, the mom and the baby, like my mom was. My mom and I literally grew up together. She was a teenager. I was a baby. All right. So if you consider yourself pro-life, it's time now to help the good work of Preborn. One ultrasound, even with Bidenflation, is still just $28. Where would you better spend $28 today than a chance at saving a human life? A pretty good chance. So if you have the means, would you please consider a leadership gift even in the biggest ways to Preborn? Your tax-deductible donation, anything from $5 to $5,000, will help sponsor Preborn's entire network for one ultrasound to up to 24 hours to rescue hundreds of potential babies to save their lives. Donate today by dialing pound 250, say the keyword baby on your mobile phone. That's pound 250, keyword baby on your mobile phone, or just go to preborn.com/Steve. That's preborn.com/Steve. Well, another issue that I consider very much a pro-life issue, because it was using the coercive power of government to target innocent people that didn't do anything to deserve what their government was permitting or even mandating being done to them. And that's what emerged during COVID, with the lockdowns, with the dehumanizations, with the mass transfer of wealth that took how many family businesses and collapsed them forever. We lost up to 10,000, if not more, small businesses permanently erased by that period of time in such a short amount of time. And then, of course, one of the great crimes against humanity of all time, and that is the COVID not vaccine, which is instead a toxic genetic serum. There recently was, at least we were told, a landmark ruling from none other than the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals when it came to the COVID jab. We want to separate fact from fiction here, and then also find out what this means for the broader debate and ongoing fight for medical freedom with our good friend Brian Festa at We the Patriots USA. Brian, it's good to have you. If you don't mind, I'm going to keep you this hour as long as I can until I run out of questions or time, whichever comes first, okay?
I've always got time for you, Steve. You know that.
I know, brother. We love the work you guys do. Thank you very much. So let's start with the ruling. Okay. Now, my understanding, let's start with the court itself, because if you're on the right, the Ninth Circuit has been a joke, and the joke's been on us, frankly, for pretty much the last few decades. Now, my understanding is it's still a fairly left of center tribunal, but one of the positive things that came out of the Trump era is they actively did try to reinvent that circuit as much as they could with the avails that they were given, and so it's not quite as crazy as it used to be. Is that an accurate assessment?
Yeah, and you can thank President Trump for that. As you know, all federal judges, not just circuit court judges, all federal judges are appointed by the president. And he appointed quite a few judges within the Ninth Circuit, but also on the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. I don't know the exact number, but it changed significantly in those 4 years of his presidency. So, yeah, the Ninth Circuit is not your father's Ninth Circuit. Well, maybe your father's. I don't know. I don't know how it was 20 years ago, 30 years ago. I shouldn't say your father's or your grandfather's. Going back, 50 or 60 years ago, it was probably okay. But I know certainly within the last 30 years, it is not the same Ninth Circuit as we're seeing today. And it's not the same Supreme Court. I mean, this is the most pro-freedom, pro-life Supreme Court that I've seen in my lifetime. I'm 46.
All right. How much of the country, that's good news. All right, so I got to get information there. How much of the country does the Ninth Circuit encompass?
A lot.
I've heard it's about one out of every four, or represents like one out of every four people in the country, like 25% of the population or something.
Yeah, I think it's between 20 and 25%, but it's if I go down the lists of states, and I can do it because I have as a reference here, which, in our discussion today, the Substack that I wrote, we have a Substack called Free the Law at We the Patriots USA Substack. And in there, I list all the states. I had to go verify this because it's states and territories. It is Alaska, Arizona, California, Hawaii, Idaho, Montana, Nevada, Oregon, Washington State, the U.S. territory of Guam, and the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands. That's a lot of people.
Okay. All right, so the court's been made over from where it was. It's gone from absolutely bat crap crazy to like Bill Clinton level of left of center Democrat. Okay, so there's some sanity now restored there. Okay, and it encompasses. It's one of the largest circuit courts at the exact same time. So obviously, with those two backdrops, not to mention now the controversy over this issue and the ongoing data that continues to be, frankly, bad, for lack of a better word, as more and more comes out in real time. A lot of attention was paid to this, particularly on our side of this ruling. So I want to start with a very basic sort of a summation, Brian. What did this ruling actually say?
It said some very, very important things with regard to health freedom. I'm going to start just very briefly, if you don't mind, with what it didn't say, because there's been a lot in the news about what it didn't say. It did not say the COVID shot was not safe and effective. It did not say that the COVID shot did not prevent the transmission of COVID-19. Now, you and I both know that it doesn't. Okay, but that's not what the court said here. And it didn't say the government cannot mandate vaccines or shots, whatever you want to call them, medical mandates, I'll just say. All right, that's what the court didn't say. That sounds like, okay, it's not that great of a decision then, but it is. Because what the court did say here is that the district court, the lower court, made a mistake in dismissing this on mootness grounds by applying Jacobson versus Massachusetts, the famous 1905 United States Supreme Court decision that really for the last better part of 120 years has been used to justify the state using its police power to enact mandates. They said, very, very important here, that the state cannot apply Jacobson. You can't use Jacobson as your basis for mandating any kind of product, anything, in this case a vaccine, that has not been proven to prevent transmission. You can't mandate something just for an individual's own personal benefit. So you can't say as the government, well, we think that this is good for you and is going to protect you, therefore you must take the shot. Only if you can prove that it prevents transmission of an illness from person to person could you then apply Jacobson to use the state's police power to mandate it. Now, I don't even agree with all of that, but that is what Jacobson says, is that the state has a police power to mandate something to prevent transmission. But the Ninth Circuit very astutely said, yeah, but first you have to actually prove that it prevents transmission. And since at the mootness stage, now this isn't rocket science, this is literally first-year law school stuff. At the motion to dismiss phase, you're supposed to take the facts pled by the plaintiffs as true. You're supposed to accept them as true. In other words, you're supposed to look at this and say, well, I don't know if what they're alleging is true.
Yeah, there's no discovery yet. No one's been deposed yet. And so this is all we know is what both people are swearing in affidavits or in their claims under oath. That's the only truth or facts that have been put into the court and not disputed yet. So you wouldn't know yet, right?
Right. You're supposed to look at the papers and say, well, there hasn't been any discovery. Right. We haven't had a trial. We don't know if this is true. But if what they're saying is true, are these claims that could move forward and could the plaintiffs obtain relief if what they're saying is true? And the court, very rightly in this case, the Ninth Circuit said, yes, if what they're alleging is true, they're right. Jacobson wouldn't apply and this should proceed and they could actually win. Now, they were very careful. Again, it's still the Ninth Circuit. They were very careful in saying, well, we don't know if it's going to be proven true. We don't know if they're going to be able to carry the burden, but we have to assume that everything they're alleging is true. Of course, that language got twisted in the media, even in our circles, pro-freedom circles, anti-medical mandate circles, to say, oh, well, the court's saying that, they can't prove it's true and it doesn't prevent transmission. And now we can use this as precedent. We can't yet. Well, we can use it as precedent, at least in the Ninth Circuit, there's a lot of states, including the one I now reside in, Idaho. What you can use as precedent is to say if the state can't prove that it prevents transmission, they can't use Jacobson as a basis for mandating anything. And that really is going to apply not just to shots, Steve, but to masks or any other medical intervention.
All right, I want to go back and discuss Jacobson in more detail in a second, but is it true or false that the defendants in this case admitted in their filings that the COVID shots are a therapeutic, and that is the reason why the court said, well, if this is what they're admitting, okay, that these things are therapeutics, which implies that it may not stop transmission, then yes, then there would be reason for this case to move forward into a discovery phase. I saw analysis that claim that. Is that true or false?
Yes. Actually, I read that, I believe. Now I'm trying to make sure I have my facts straight, but I believe I read that in the court's decision, not just in a news report, that, the defendants, I believe, did refer to it as a therapeutic. A therapeutic is not, as you know, the same as a vaccine that supposedly, I can't call it a vaccine, but an intervention that supposedly
stops transmission. Yes.
Stops transmission and provides immunity. So as you know, the CDC changed the definition of vaccine. Right
before the COVID shots came out, they did, as a matter of fact. Yes. Yeah.
Yes. And the change, and as a matter of fact, the court here, the Ninth Circuit, discusses that. I mean, this is a great decision for so many reasons, but they actually say, look, the CDC themselves changed the definition from a substance that provides immunity to one that stimulates the immune system. Well, or stimulates some sort of immune response. Well, okay, they can probably prove that it stimulates the immune system. Not in a good way. It does. I mean, you're producing spike proteins. It's doing horrible things to your body. But that is a stimulation of the immune system, but it's not providing immunity against COVID. In fact, the data shows, as you know, that the people who get the shot actually get sicker, because then they move the goalposts and say, well, it's not even about preventing transmission, but you just won't get as sick if you get it. But that's not even true.
So Jacobson, this is the infamous case going back to the smallpox era. Is this the infamous case where essentially Oliver Wendell Holmes said, for lack of, I'm paraphrasing and summarizing here, that if you're too stupid to get something that would help somebody else, then the state can basically do, if we're going to stop transmission, the state can do whatever it wants to. Is that the case we're talking about?
No, actually, but that case is Buck v. Bell from 1927, which relied on Jacobson. Okay. They used Jacobson to uphold a sterilization mandate for certain women who, the term they used, they didn't say stupid, they said imbeciles. They said 3 generations, Oliver Wendell Holmes, as you quoted, 3 generations of imbeciles is enough. And used Jacobson to say the state has the police power to force sterilize someone. Now, this is huge because most people don't know this. That's still good law in the United States of America. That's case law. It's not good. But when I say good law as a lawyer,
it means it has case law standing, not that it's moral, but it has case law standing. It's not been overturned.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. It's highly immoral. It's diabolic, but it is still good case law and good precedent that could be cited by an attorney today or by the state, the government, the federal government, to enact a sterilization mandate. It's very clear that has not been overturned. Now, most legal scholars on both sides of the political aisle have decried it as immoral, but still to this day, it has not been overturned, nor has Jacobson. But this is why Jacobson's so dangerous, because when people try to say, your slippery slope arguments are way out there, you're conspiracy theorists, the government would never do this, they could never do this, the law wouldn't allow them to do this. Well, actually, the law did allow them to do this in 1927. And what case did they use to justify that? Jacobson v. Massachusetts.
Okay. So let's get into what. Actually, let me pause. let's talk about procedurally where this is going to go first, because then you and I are going to get into the finding of facts and what's true here and what is not. But I want to make sure our audience comes away from this very well informed about how the process is going to play out from here, because that's the stuff that you have expertise in that I do not. Okay, so let's talk about that. Okay, so what will happen now in light of this ruling from the Ninth Circuit Court? What happens next?
Well, now it returns to the district court for a trial, which is what we've been waiting for 4 years now, or actually 3 since the shot came out, right? We've been waiting for the science to be put on trial. This is so key because for the first time ever, there's going to be discovery directly related to the statistics, the data that the CDC has, that the FDA has, studies that were done or were not done. There's more that were not done that should have been done than were. Statements that were made, and plowing into those statements, dissecting those statements by government officials that were made under oath that says that these are completely safe and effective and that they have evidence for it. That's all going to be laid bare now. And this is going to be a very high profile trial. Everybody should be watching it. Around the world really should be watching it. And it's in the Ninth Circuit, which is, like, as you said, a huge circuit. It's going to get a lot of attention. It may go all the way to the United States Supreme Court. That would not be a bad thing if it does, because if this is upheld, either at the district court level or at the circuit court, or if it's not upheld, even if the plaintiffs lose and they appeal it to the United States Supreme Court and we get a victory there, then that would apply all across the United States. So that actually legally, although it would take longer, would be the best thing to happen, is for this to go all the way to the United States Supreme Court. So we have a nationwide decision, not just those of us who are fortunate enough. I never thought I'd say that, Steve, fortunate enough to live in the Ninth Circuit. But,
strange
Idaho
days indeed. Yes. As the song once sang, yes.
Idaho's in there.
All right, so
anyway,
do the defendants have an appeal of this ruling, or was this their appeal? And so there will be a trial now.
So they could appeal. Technically, you can appeal any circuit court ruling to the United States Supreme Court. You can file a cert petition. I don't think that's going to happen in this case, because I don't think, number one, I don't think they want that, because right now, if the Supreme Court were to take this right now and were to affirm the Ninth Circuit,
then we're going to have arguments at the Supreme Court. Then instead of a district trial where a lot of people will tune in, we're going to have a Supreme Court hearing where everybody tunes in to hear the arguments, whether this case should go forward or not, right?
Right.
Or at least we'll have it, or at least those people will put briefings and filings to the Supreme Court to make their case, giving this an even bigger stage.
Yes, and it's not only, there wouldn't be a trial, of course, at the Supreme Court, but the legal holdings of this case would now be debated at the Supreme Court, that whether Jacobson should apply if you can't prove that the shot prevents transmission, and whether any government can mandate anything without being able to prove that would now be put before the Supreme Court. And I believe very strongly that they would affirm the Ninth Circuit's decision here, which then means that would be binding all across the United States. The LA Unified School District does not want that. They want this to go away. I don't know whether they're going to propose a settlement. I'm not going to speculate as an attorney. That's inappropriate for me to be doing, because I'm not involved in the case. And even if I were, that's confidential. But they could do that. They could propose a settlement. They could try to get this stopped before it goes through a full trial. The plaintiffs aren't going to do that. I want to give credit here to Leslie Manookian and Health Freedom Defense Fund. It's another organization. We like them a lot. We may even be working with them in the future. We're discussing that. She's a friend of mine, but it's not our organization. So I want to make clear, we're not taking credit for this victory at We the Patriots USA. It's Health Freedom Defense Fund that brought this case, and everybody should support them. But
pardon me one second. Forgive me, because that was a major slight on my part. We need to go back to the beginning. The defendants are the LA unit, is the Los Angeles School District, right? Okay, and then the plaintiffs are whom?
The Health Freedom Defense Fund and some individual teachers staff members who work for the LA Unified School District. So they joined with individual plaintiffs, which is what we always do too when we file cases, because just in case.
So this can't come later on the Supreme Court like they did on the abortion pill last week. Well, you guys don't have standing, okay? These are teachers who were party to the mandates of the school district. They absolutely have standing here to bring this suit. Okay.
Absolutely. Even if they kicked out Health Freedom Defense Fund as a plaintiff, you'd still have individual plaintiffs. Right. We always do that too, because in case they kick out We the Patriots and say we don't have organizational standing, we still have those individual parents or whoever, whatever the case is, those individual people, employees that were affected. So the case can still go forward and we can still get that decision and that victory. So yes, it's a case now that's going to hopefully go all the way through trial. The science will be put on trial, which is what we've been asking for. People like you and your friend, my friend as well, Daniel Horowitz, that I spoke to last week. You've been demanding this for years now, that the science needs to be put on trial. This needs to be exposed in court for the public, and people need to be held accountable. People like Anthony Fauci and people like Rochelle Walensky and other people that lied to Congress, that lied under oath and said that there was evidence that these were safe, they prevented transmission. None of that was true. They knew it wasn't true, and they've gotten away with it all this time. Where are the indictments, Steve?
Later in this conversation, I'm going to prove that they knew it was true without beyond a reasonable doubt, to use your legal parlance. But we'll get to that here in a second. I want to stick with the procedural stuff to make sure our audience can follow that part of it. What are the odds, therefore, that there's going to be some form of discovery process, at least beginning, in this trial this year?
I'd say it should begin this year. It will not be completed this year. The trial will not be completed this year. But based on normal timelines, if they don't unreasonably delay and get motion for continuance granted, which the state and local governments do tend to do that to try to, wait it out. But they already know it's not going to be dismissed on mootness grounds because the Ninth Circuit already said it can't be. So I'm not sure why they would do that other than just to hope that the plaintiffs back down or something, which isn't going to happen, or run out of money. Sometimes they do that too, which is why it's so important to fund these organizations like Health Freedom Defense Fund in ours, because the state has unlimited money. The state, they'll just keep getting their money from the state of California and from the federal government. They have attorneys on payroll. They have insurance. They have unlimited funds. Organizations like ours that bring these suits don't. So a tactic they often use is to delay, and hope that we just back down. It's not going to happen. I'm obviously an attorney myself, so even if we ran out of money, I'll just, continue to do it for free myself. We're not, if I had to. But that's what's going to happen. I expect before the end of the year that, yes, there would be a scheduling. Well, there'll definitely be a scheduling order set by the district court, and then discovery will begin before the end of the year. I don't know whether the actual trial, the actual hearings will begin before then. They should. I would hope by the fall, late fall, November, December, you'd have a trial underway, because discovery could take at least the rest of the summer into the early fall. With all of the motions that are going to be filed. It's a long process for those that have never been through it before. It's not like you just ask for what you want from the other side and they just turn it over to you and then you go forward and you have a trial. The other side's going to say, no, we don't have to give this to you. It's privileged. We object to these requests. And then, of course, the plaintiffs are going to object, from whatever they're asking for, the discovery they're asking for. Then you have to have hearings on that to decide. The judge will decide what gets in and what doesn't as far as discovery, not necessarily as far as admissibility yet, but just as far as what the parties can ask for. So that's why it's long. This is what due process looks like, though, because if we rushed everything, we would not get the opportunity to adequately present our side. Right. And it has to be, unfortunately, long for it to be done properly.
What are the odds that something out of this discovery becomes open for public consumption before the election?
It's only going to go into the public record if it's admitted into evidence, and that happens during the trial phase. And I can't guarantee that a trial is going to be underway before November 5th. I hope so.
So like deposition transcriptions, logs, anything of that nature, you don't foresee becoming public until we get to the trial?
Until we get to the trial, yeah, because until it's actually admitted into evidence, it's not part of the record.
Okay.
So, no reporter is going to get access to that. I, as an attorney, if I'm exchanging, discovery requests and we're exchanging documents with the other side, I'm not allowed to disclose that to the public. That's confidential and it's not entered into evidence. Now, of course, the party in possession of the evidence, the party that actually is producing the documents, they could divulge it, but they never will. The LA Unified School District, however, of course, is a government entity, and they are subject to a Freedom of Information Act request. So, or the state of California Freedom of Information Act. So, of course, requests can be put in to produce this, but there's often exceptions in the law, and I'd have to go back and check California statutes. I'm not a California attorney, but there's often exceptions for, ongoing litigation. Things that are the subject of ongoing litigation don't have to be disclosed to the public during the pendency of the litigation. So the chances are that that's not going to be disclosed. But if the trial is underway before the election day, then yes, some of it could be. I can't predict what the court's going to do. I mean, the court could move this along more quickly. The court could want to get this going. I don't know. But unless the trial is underway, unfortunately, it won't be disclosed. We'll just have to wait. But It is what it is.
All right, Brian, stay there. When I come back to you after the break, I've got a couple things I'll tease to the audience for a second that in a second that I want to make sure we discuss before we let you go, because this is great information so far from Brian Festa at wethepatriotsusa.org. Again, that's wethepatriotsusa.org. Definitely worthy of your charitable donations for the work that they do all over the country. Also worthy of your business is our friends over at Patriot Mobile. I was down in Pigeon Forge at Rise Up Con for faith-based filmmakers 2 weeks ago. The hall that one of my events was in, sponsored by Patriot Mobile. I've mentioned before, it is rare for me to do a national event on the right and not see them represented. They take seriously reinvesting the profits you give them into securing the values that they share with you. And they also take seriously the fact they have a heck of a product. They have an outstanding U.S.-based customer service team. If you're a veteran or first responder, you want to make the switch to Patriot Mobile today, let them know when you give them a call, and they've got extra ways to say thank you for your service. All of us can use my name, Steve, to get a free activation code when you make the switch today to patriotmobile.com/Steve. Now's the time. We all wish we had more of a parallel economy. One place where we do have it fully available is with a product we all need to use nowadays, our mobile phones. Make the switch today to patriotmobile.com/Steve. I know what you're thinking. I thought it was going to be a hassle too. And they made it incredibly seamless for our family. patriotmobile.com/Steve is where you want to go. Again, use the offer code Steve at patriotmobile.com/Steve. All right, when we come back here with Brian Festa from We the Patriots USA, I'm going to present what I think is irrefutable evidence that they knew all along, or at least that they knew in advance of when they issued their mandate, that the toxic genetic serum called the COVID mRNA, not a vaccine, was not a vaccine, that it didn't work in stopping transmission, and whether the evidence I'm going to present could be part of the evidence in this case or not. And then what would this case potentially open for broader medical freedom debates and battles? We'll get into those 2 points with Brian Festa when we return. Stay tuned. Folks, you can say goodbye to nasty home odors and costly filters. With the Eden Pure Thunderstorm Air Purifier, it eliminates bad smells because it's an air purifier, not an air freshener. It goes after the components, the mildew, the musks, the bacteria, even some viruses that are the reason for why you have the smells in your home you're trying to get rid of. It goes after them and it gets rid of them. And it does this with its exclusive Oxy technology that is filterless, so there'll be no more costly filters to buy out of pocket and spend time replacing out of your own schedule. You don't have to do that anymore because the Eden Pure does it all. And if you want to place a thunderstorm in your bedroom, family room, kitchen, or basement, you can get the 3-pack today for whole home protection for $200 off when you visit EdenPureDeals.com and use the discount code Steve3. That's EdenPureDeals.com, discount code Steve3. Again, get $200 off the 3-pack at EdenPureDeals.com, discount code Steve3. All right, let's welcome back in our good friend Brian Festa from We the Patriots USA.org. Again, We the Patriots USA.org. So, if it appears that much of this case is going to revolve around the fact, and correct me my analysis as a professional if I'm wrong, but it appears that much of this landmark case that the Ninth Circuit ruled on last week, at the district court level, this trial is going to be about whether or not the COVID vaccine is actually a vaccine, whether it operates as an inoculation against the spread of transmission. That's essentially what is the threshold under Jacobson to deny someone their basic civil liberties and human rights is if they are a carrier of something that they could supposedly spread to other people, even though they're somehow inoculated themselves. So I don't know why you're worried about getting it if they're not. We'll get into that's another question for later. Okay, but for now, the specific scope of this case is do these shots meet the threshold of an actual vaccine? Is that true?
Yes, based on the Ninth Circuit's ruling with regard to whether Jacobson is applicable. Now, of course, the individual plaintiffs are challenging the mandate itself, whether the state could mandate it, or in this case, the local government, the school district, could mandate it at all. But obviously that hinges on the Jacobson analysis, right? Because Jacobson is the case that they rely on to say that the government has the power to mandate these things. So we would need essentially the courts to overturn Jacobson as precedent with a different precedent like the Supreme Court did in 2022 with Roe v. Wade via the Dobbs decision. That's what we would need, right? Well, honestly, based on what the Ninth Circuit is saying, Steve, you don't even need to overturn Jacobson because according to the Ninth Circuit, Jacobson has been misapplied. Jacobson never said that you can mandate something just to give someone their own personal health benefit. The direct quote, I'm going to read it here from the court, is the district court thus erred in holding that Jacobson extends beyond its public health rationale, government's power to mandate prophylactic measures aimed at preventing the recipient from spreading disease to others, to also govern forced medical treatment for the recipient's benefit. So they overstepped their bounds and said that, well, no, it doesn't just, this is what the school district apparently, or the district court made a mistake in their analysis in saying that Jacobson extends to cases where it's only providing a benefit to the recipient, but doesn't prevent disease from spreading. No, because Jacobson was about the spread of smallpox in Cambridge, Massachusetts in 1904. The case was decided in 1905, but in 1903, 1904, there was this mandate because smallpox was rampant in Massachusetts. And so the city of Cambridge said that they enacted a mandate, and if you don't get the shot, you'll be fined $5, which is the equivalent to about $120 today.
Now, to put this in perspective, by the way, in human history, the three greatest killers in human history prior to the 19th century were war, childbirth, and smallpox. Okay? So, I mean, the CFR, IFR of smallpox and its various strains compared to any of the data that we had on what was going on with COVID-19, even at its most sensationalized, isn't even close to the scourge and the specter of smallpox, particularly to...
Or the bubonic plague.
Or particularly to people in the very early pre-antibiotic anesthesia era of 1904. Okay, I mean that's just, childbirth still would have been a leading cause of death of women in America in 1904. All right, so the condition to have a medical trust the science crowd to have a medical precedent last that goes back to mass anesthesia, pre-indoor plumbing, okay, pre-antibiotic, and have that be the standing precedent of medicine and medical intervention by government, given where we are as a society today, regardless of what side of this issue you're on, is frankly, on a scientific level, preposterous. If you walked into a 4th grade life science class and they said, "Hey guys, we're going to teach you what people thought, about virtually any form of physics in 1904 compared to now," you'd walk out. You're like, what is this? So the fact we're doing this here where it comes to this is beyond preposterous. To me, if this comes down to, does this thing operate as an inoculation or not, the smoking gun has already been entered into public evidence, Brian. On August 6th, 2021, Rochelle Walensky went on Wolf Blitzer and CNN on that date and admitted on national television that with the arrival now of the full-fledged arrival of the Delta variant, the COVID shots no longer stopped transmission, and that, in fact, even vaccinated people could get now and spread the virus. That was on August 6th of 2021 on CNN. Almost exactly a month later, on September 7th or 8th, I think it was, is when Biden issued his ill-fated order that the Supreme Court would strike down about 6 months later. That everybody that worked at a corporation that had more than 100 employees had to get a shot to stop transmission of a virus that a month prior, his own CDC director went on national television. Now, admittedly, it was CNN, so not a lot of people saw it, okay? But she went on national television and admitted it doesn't actually stop transmission. They knew this before they even issued their order. Tell me why that's just not a smoking gun. If the whole case, if the predicate of this case is, does this thing stop transmission? Why do we need to go any further than roll tape? Here's what the CDC director said on August 6, 2021, and then I rest my case. Why do we need to do anything else, Brian?
Well, because the CDC director is fallible. She's just one person, and there could be all kinds of excuses made that she misspoke or something like that. But it doesn't really matter, though, Steve, because the science isn't there. They don't have one single study to prove that it prevents transmission. And in fact, there is clear evidence in the science to prove that it does not prevent transmission. And their own officials admitted it. That is a smoking gun. I agree with you. But in court, they're going to want to see, well, are there any studies, that conflict with what she said that would prove that it stops transmission? Maybe she wasn't aware of them, but they're not going to find them. We could do discovery for the next, 20 years and they'll never find them. It's not going to be that long. But the school district in Los Angeles was still mandating this in September of 2023. This hearing before the Ninth Circuit, when the arguments were made, was September 14th, 2023. And they still had a mandate in place for their employees. And the school district's attorney, according to the affidavit of the plaintiff's attorney, the school district's attorney, as they were walking out of the courtroom, turned to the plaintiff's attorney and said, well, what are you going to do when we just rescind the mandate? In other words, we're just going to do that, so then your case is going to be moot. Ha ha. Well, the Ninth Circuit didn't take too kindly to that, and they really, really dropped the hammer on the school district and their attorneys and said, you're not going to use litigation to play games anymore. We're not going to, we don't take kindly to these kind of litigation tactics. And your case is not going to, the case is not going to be dismissed as moot. And, because of these games, because they had a mandate and they rescinded it. They had it, they rescinded it. They had it again on September 23, and they said, oh, we're going to rescind it. 12 days later, after that attorney made that statement, the school board voted to rescind it. So they were clearly playing games and using this litigation as a strategy, but the court...
Meaning, for people who don't know what Brian is saying, is, oh, you sued us, we don't have the mandate, so there's no basis or standing for this lawsuit. The point is now moot, right? That's essentially, it's a shuck and jive. They were trying to rope and dope. Yeah.
Yeah, they do that. This is very typical. We've had, in fact, our mask mandate case, unfortunately, Connecticut, the state of Connecticut Supreme Court did not rule the same way the Ninth Circuit did. We had a mask mandate case back in, when the mask mandate first was enacted for schools back in 2020. we had a mask mandate case, and unfortunately, 3 years later, the Connecticut Supreme Court said, well, it's moot now because it's been rescinded. Because, again, the state slow walks everything, and that's their game. And usually it works. Yes. Usually it works, which is why our case was dismissed. In this case, again, bravo to the Ninth Circuit. I never thought I'd be saying this on your show or anyone else's, but they did a great job here. This was exactly the decision that should have been rendered. And this is going to have widespread implications, and I'm sure you want me to just briefly mention that.
Yes,
so
that was the next point.
I'll let you ask the questions.
I'm going to give you the last 3 more minutes because I want to get Todd and Aaron's take on this to wrap it up, okay? So in 3 minutes, tell us what would be, if the good guys win, and of course, what we have to see what the scope of the ruling in that case would be. But what are the potential ramifications of this moving forward, even beyond just this particular therapeutic?
The ramifications are huge. If the good guys win here and you can prove that Jacobson does not apply, in other words, the government does not have the power to mandate unless you can prove something stops transmission. This would apply to mask mandates. This would apply to other shots like RSV and the flu shot. The flu shot, Steve, has been mandated in hospitals for at least the last 15 years without a shred of evidence that it prevents transmission from, nurse to patient or doctor to nurse or patient. There is no evidence, and yet it's been mandated for over a decade in hospitals, going on 2 decades in hospitals. You wouldn't be able to have flu shot mandates, RSV, anything else, because there's no evidence they prevent transmission for the vast majority of these shots. And like I said, even masks would not be able to be mandated anymore. So this, like I said, this is why I wanted to go to the Supreme Court. I don't want to just get a victory at the Ninth Circuit, although that would be great. I want the Supreme Court to say, yes, Jacobson doesn't apply unless the government meets their burden of proving through real science that it prevents transmission. And even then, you need to be able to opt out on religious grounds. And the last thing I'll say is this week, Steve, We the Patriots USA has a case that's coming before the Supreme Court on Thursday in their conference. It's not a hearing, but it's in their conferences. The justices are meeting to decide whether or not to grant our petition for cert and put our case on their agenda for the fall for a hearing. So everybody, please pray and please watch that, because this is a religious exemption case. We filed for the state of Connecticut, but if we win, it could reinstate religious exemptions for school children, not only in Connecticut, but in California, New York, Maine, and West Virginia, everywhere where they currently do not have religious exemptions to vaccinations. If we win this case, that's 20% of the nation's population that children can't opt out of vaccinations in schools. As you know, this is very personal to me because my son was severely injured by a shot over 10 years ago. And so this is our centerpiece litigation, and we've been working on this for over 3 years, and the Supreme Court is meeting on Thursday to decide. So everybody pray for us. If you can support us, wethepatriotsusa.org. I know Bidenomics has crushed everyone, but this has cost us many, many thousands of dollars to get here. And if the fight won't be over, if they grant it, we're going to need to spend a lot of money to go forward with the oral arguments and ultimately, hopefully, come out with a victory for the whole nation.
Folks, they've been on the front lines from the beginning where COVID's concerned, when many others, frankly, either didn't see it or didn't have the courage to do anything about it. So that's why we've tried to support and help We the Patriots USA as often as we can. And we thank Brian for the time that he's donated here to our audience. So make sure you consider making a donation today. It's tax deductible at wethepatriotsusa.org. That's wethepatriotsusa.org. Brian, God bless you, brother. Really appreciate you. Thanks for the time today.
God bless you, Steve.
You bet. All right, Todd and Aaron, on behalf of the audience, you sit there and listen to it in real time as they did. Your thoughts on what you just heard?
Well, while I knew and understand why the rush to, hey, look at what this thing did, and good people like Tracy Bean said it doesn't say that. There's work to do. Absolutely right. But as somebody who's been on the cutting edge for a while now, the magical power of vaccines, this is why this is so important. It goes way beyond legal precedent. And Jacobson is never going to be overturned. But the reason why we even got to this point is to be able to just bamboozle people psychologically and emotionally about how we label anything in terms of westernized medicine. This thing going all the way, as he said, to the Supreme Court, which is why I think the quality of these plaintiffs is huge, because somebody is going to try to pay them. That there's no way around this fact. It has now opened up the potential to wake people up. If you can ultimately get this ruling where you can no longer psychologically lie to yourself, it is there. If they accomplish what the potential that this can accomplish, you denying this will be saying that no, that blue sky is green. That's why this is so important. It's way beyond legal precedent. It is psychological, emotional, scientific reality.
Aaron.
Think about how mad this is, insane this is. That we are talking about maybe in the bowels of the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. We're talking about something that should, in a functioning society, just kind of be common sense. We're not kind of waiting on the technocracy of court proceedings going on to tell us that a thing that doesn't stop transmission, there's no way in hell that should be mandated by the government on a populace. Yeah. Not to mention face masks, which up until 5 minutes ago, nobody was claiming they stopped transmission of respiratory viruses. And then on top of that, even if we're successful, which is I would say probably a long shot here, we're probably going to be looking at a Supreme Court case, and John Roberts is going to have to decide whether or not the government can mandate. This is madness. And one more thing, the only reason why we have this thermal exhaust port chance is because of a guy like Brian, who nobody knew his name prior to like 3 years ago, has the courage to step out. People like Brian, I'm just holding him up as the example since he was just on the show. They have the courage to actually bring up these types of cases. So God bless them all, because without them, we wouldn't even be getting these types of stories.
No doubt. I mean, they're literally David in the Valley Vila with some smooth stones, man. No doubt about it. Up against Goliath. But we know how that story ended. Back at it again tomorrow, noon to 2 Eastern, right after Glenn Beck, right here on The Blaze. Until then, Romans 8:28.